Should I hire someone to manage my PPC campaigns or should I find an agency? What about product development, supply, or customer service? Should we manage that internally or should we outsource that? First of all, we need to understand the difference. Then we will be able to see which one is better for our business and make the right decision. This is something that all of us will eventually have to do in order to get to high 6, 7, or even 8 figures. Understanding the difference and being able to decide is the key to an efficient business. So how do we decide between outsourcing and delegating? The objective is the same. We want to redistribute our workload in order to free up our time and our mental capacity and also remove bottlenecks in our business. But before we make the decision, we have to understand the difference. So first of all, let's take a look at delegating. When we are delegating, we are essentially assigning accountability for a specific task or a process to another person on our team, which means that processes are created and managed internally within our business. So the workflow looks something like this. We set the objective, we develop the process, we hire the labor, we delegate the process, and then we optimize the process as we go. So the team structure can look something like this, where you have the owner hiring someone, delegating a specific process to them, and then the accountability is clear. And the new person knows who is he reporting to, right? And that goes for everyone we bring into our team. And obviously there are some costs involved. First of all, we have to build the process. We have to find talent and we have to onboard and train them. And this is our upfront investment, right? And the cost comes in form of our time. We are not necessarily paying money to build the process, but we spend hours and hours developing and perfecting the process. We spend hours finding the employee, right? So we can estimate the cost in form of our time, which we should know what is the value of our time based on our average hourly rate. And there are obviously some ongoing costs involved as well. First one is managing. We have to manage our employees, and this once again comes in form of our time. And of course, the cost of their salary and all of the potential performance bonuses as well. And when we look at outsourcing, that is essentially a contract with an outside party to provide a specific service, which means that the processes are created and managed externally outside of our business. And the workflow is very different here. The first step is the same. We set the objective, what we want to achieve, but they have their own process, they have their own labor, and they hopefully optimize their process. And the structure looks more something like this. You can have an agency or a freelancer, but they do not necessarily care about the structure of your business. They only care about the specific service, right? If you hire a PPC agency to optimize your PPC campaigns and you outsource the optimization process to them, your graphic designer probably don't even know about them because they simply don't care. They only care about the specific outcome they are getting for your business. And obviously, all of them are reporting back to you in this case. The upfront investment here is minimal because we do not have to spend the time building the process, hiring, onboarding, and so on. But there are, once again, some ongoing costs. That is communication. Once again, that comes in form of our time. But there is, of course, the cost of service. And the cost of service consists of, first of all, their costs, their salaries, their fixed costs, and so on, and also their margin, because these agencies are businesses as well, so they have to make money and they have to cover all of their costs, so that will be included in the cost of their service. So the main difference comes down to the level of control. In both cases, we specify the outcome we want, but when we are delegating, we have full control over how that outcome is delivered. But while outsourcing, we really have limited control over this, because we do not develop the process. And of course, it is not possible to say it is one or the other. It should be a combination of these two to achieve maximum efficiency. So we cannot really say that one is better than the other, but we have to understand the pros and cons of delegating and outsourcing. So let's look at delegating first. Looking at the pros, probably the biggest pro here is that we have control over how work is done and there is full transparency. We probably have some task management software and our employee can share updates, what is going on, and how they are achieving the outcome. And if we don't like something, we can simply step into the process and make some adjustments. We are also building process knowledge. That means that our know-how is stored internally. So let's say you are optimizing your PPC campaigns internally with your employee and you learn about this new approach that is working for your business. You are getting great results. So you will write that down and the next time you do it, you will get the better results. And maybe you will learn something else. So once again, you will write that down and that's how you build the process knowledge over the long term. And you are getting better and better at that particular thing. Also, when delegating, you have independent operations. You do not really rely on a third party. Also, your employees are probably more likely to have some personal interest in you and your business. And the reason for that is obvious. If you are their only employer, it's probably in their best interest to do their best job so your business is doing well, so they can get paid more and they can keep their job. And of course, you will get to know them better as well as you work with them year after year. Implementing best practices. This is probably the best and also the worst part about delegating. It's up to you to stay on top of it. It's up to you to develop your expertise. So it can be a huge advantage if you are able to do that, but it can be a huge disadvantage if you are not able to stay on top of the process. It simply becomes your job or your employee's job to optimize the process and make sure that you are following the best practices. And there are some cons involved as well. And the biggest one is, as I said, developing and maintaining the expertise, because it will take a lot of time to develop an expertise in a particular area of your business, but it will take a lot of time and effort to also maintain that expertise. Because you cannot simply set and then forget most of the things in your business if you want to stay ahead of the curve. And this will also require new skill sets, because you will have to learn how to develop processes, how to hire, and how to manage a team. And if you do not have these skill sets, you will have to get them first in order to be able to build a team and delegate efficiently. And of course, there is the upfront investment. You will have to spend the time building the process, hiring the employee, and training them. And now let's take a look at outsourcing. So in this case, we can gain access to expertise we might not have. As I said before, with delegating, if we want to create an efficient process, we need the expertise in order to do that. And if we do not have the expertise, it makes more sense to find someone who does. Also, we are minimizing the upfront investment. We do not have to spend the time building the process, finding employees, and so on. And obviously, if we outsource some of the processes in our business, we will have more capacity to develop the expertise we actually want, the expertise that will drive the growth of our business. But once again, with outsourcing, there are some cons as well. And the biggest one is limited control and lack of flexibility. Because as I said, we do not really have control over how the outcome is delivered. So if we don't like something and we want to tweak something, in most cases, we simply can't do it, right? Because there is little flexibility, because they have their own process, they have multiple clients, so they are not going to tweak things just because we want to, right? There is also no process knowledge. The know-how is stored externally. So maybe they are optimizing, they are getting better, they are learning, but if they decide to quit or we decide to fire them, all of the know-how was stored externally. So we don't really know what they've learned with our business. So it will be then harder for us to replicate the same outcome. And of course, if they are an agency or a freelancer, they will have multiple clients. So the personal interest in our business will be significantly lower than with our employees. And of course, in this case, we are also dependent on a third party. So if they decide to quit or they are not profitable, they will fire our account manager or whatever. We are simply dependent on the third party. They are running a business and we cannot really change the way they do it. And if they do it wrong, they will fail and it will affect our business. So we are giving up control, giving it to a third party. So I also wanted to show you the structure we followed, what we delegated and what we outsourced. But before I do that, I'd like to show you our decision process. So you can then replicate this process to make these decisions in your business as well. So with the decision process, the first step is to understand the costs. As I said, with delegating, there is the upfront investment in form of our time. And if you want to estimate the cost, you need to understand the value of your time. And that will be your average hourly rate, your average monthly profit divided by your average hours worked per month. And as I said, with outsourcing, we do not really pay the upfront investment, right? We just decide the outcome we need, and then we will find someone and they will do the job. But we also have to understand that we are paying their labor, their costs, and their margins. So in general, outsourcing may be cheaper in the short term, but more expensive in the long term. Because when delegating, we will spend a lot of time developing the process, finding the right person. It will take us dozens and dozens of hours to do that properly. But we are then paying just the labor. We are not paying the agency's fixed costs and other costs that may be included in the cost of their service. So as I said, this does not necessarily have to be true in all cases, but in general, in my experience, the outsourcing really seems to be cheaper in the short term because they can hit the ground running and get the job done. But in the long term, it's getting a bit more expensive. So let's take a look at the decision cheat sheet I prepared for you. So we have 3 questions. The first one, is that a core process in my business? So if you are looking at specific process you would like to delegate or outsource, ask yourself, is that a core process in my business? The second question, do I have the expertise to create the process? The third question, do I have enough resources for the upfront investment? Your time and your mental capacity, especially your time and your mental capacity to do that. And here is also a brief overview. So when outsourcing, it probably should not be a core process. It should be something where you don't have the capacity or you don't have the expertise to create the process. You have no existing process. So as I said, you have no experience. You've probably done that just a few times or you've never done that before. And you have no need to store the know-how. And of course, the cost of service looks lower than the upfront investment in the long term. When delegating, it is the exact opposite. It should be a core process where you have the capacity and or an existing expertise. You have maybe some existing process in place because you've done that many times before, and it will be advantageous for you to store the know-how in the long term. And also in cases where the cost of service is higher than the upfront investment, once again, looking at the long term. So let me give you a few examples to really explain this in detail. So let's say you are designing a new website for your brand. You are probably not going to develop a process and onboard a designer since this is a one-time thing. So you decide to outsource, right? So let's say you don't have the capacity or existing experience to do that. You have no existing process because you've never developed a website before. It is not a core process. Creating website is not a core process for your Amazon business. You don't need to store know-how. You can always find someone who is just better at making websites. And probably the cost of service to pay someone to make your website is probably lower than finding a designer and paying them and keeping them on your team. You will decide to outsource this. But this scenario can be different if you have multiple products and you are creating a new funnel for every product. So let's say you are creating a new funnel every other month. In that case, having a website designer on your team could be a huge advantage because in that case, it is a core process of your marketing, creating these funnels, new funnel for every single product. If you've probably done that before, you have some existing expertise, so you can develop the process, and you probably also have some existing process. And it could be advantageous for you to store the know-how because if you learn how to make these funnels better and better, every single product launch will benefit from that. The next example is getting new lifestyle photos for your products. And once again, in this case, you probably do not need a photographer on your team, so you decide to outsource. It may be a core process because you want to get good photos for every single product you launch, but you probably do not have the capacity or existing expertise how to make good photos. And there is no need to store know-how because you will always be able to find a good photographer who is simply better than you at the job of taking good photos. But once again, the scenario can be different. If you have a brand and you are super active on Instagram and you are sharing multiple photos on Instagram and other social media every single day of your products, maybe having a photographer on your team could be beneficial. Once again, it would be your core process in marketing. And if you need the photos on an ongoing basis, definitely the cost of service would be higher if you would have to pay for an external photographer every single time to send products into his studio and stuff like that, right? So this really depends on your business and your situation, but this cheat sheet should really help you to make the right decision. There is one more example. Let's say you want to remove yourself from inventory management. You are managing your inventory, you are doing forecasting, spending a lot of time doing that. And in this case, you probably want to hire a supply manager so they can follow your process, right? You developed and perfected the process over the years, so it makes more sense to bring a supply manager on board, so you decide to delegate. Once again, looking at this cheat sheet, inventory management, definitely a core process. You have some existing expertise because you've been doing this for your business basically since you launched, and you should have the capacity because this is extremely important. That's one of the core processes in your business. Once again, you probably have some existing process. It is extremely advantageous to store your know-how and perfect your forecasting. And that's why we decide to delegate, to find a supply manager, build the process, and delegate it to them. But as I said, this does not necessarily mean that you cannot outsource a core process. This is very important. And I believe that PPC management is a good example of a process you may decide to outsource. And the reason for that is simple. Amazon is changing PPC quite frequently. They're adding new campaign types, new options, new tools. So it may be really complicated for you to stay on top of it since you have to update the process and the SOPs every single time they make a change, right? So as I said here, implementing best practices, it can be a huge advantage while delegating, but it can take a lot of effort and time to stay ahead of the curve. While if you work with an agency and you outsource your PPC management, it's all they do. So it's way easier for them to stay ahead of the curve and monitor the news, right? When Amazon introduced video ads, the PPC agencies knew about this. They were monitoring the situation and they were ready to tell you, like, Amazon is about to do this. This is our approach. We just need a video. But if it would be just you managing that internally, it may be hard to simply monitor the news every single week because you have other stuff to do. So in this case, you may decide to actually outsource PPC management, even though it's a core process. And if you, let's say, compare inventory management, which is a core process, with PPC management, there are not that many changes happening in inventory management. Yes, the seasonality can change, but the process is still the same. So you don't have to constantly learn about new tools and new practices. You just optimize the data you work with and you learn how to work with the data, but you don't necessarily have to update it every other month. And finally, let's take a look at our structure. First of all, this is what worked for us, but your business may be different, so please do not just blindly copy this. The main point here is that we were maximizing control because we were building our business for the long run. So we wanted to store as much know-how as possible, and we also wanted to develop our expertise in areas that would grow our business. We wanted to stay ahead of the curve on top of it in areas that we knew that would drive the growth of our business. These are the core processes we decided to optimize and manage internally: product development, supply, inventory management, operations, that means split testing, analyzing data, and so on, and customer service. And as you can see, that is essentially the core pipeline of the business. You develop a product, you get it into Amazon, you optimize your strategy, your listing, your pricing, and then you have customer service to take care of your customers. It is as simple as that. And what was driving growth of our business? That was product development, efficient supply chain, accurate inventory management, rigorous testing and data analysis, and then amazing customer service. That is the core of our business. So we decided to optimize and manage everything internally, and it was our job to develop the expertise, to store the know-how, and make sure that everything here is on point. But these processes we decided to outsource. That includes marketing, optimizing PPC campaigns, getting all of our brand assets. We were working with professionals. We did not have the expertise to take photos, to create the designs, to shoot videos, to write a copy on our listing. So we worked with professionals. We outsourced that. Even though it was extremely important to our business, our job was to find the experts because we simply did not have the capacity to, or the existing expertise to develop a process for that and learn how to write a copy and or how to make a great video. And accounting. That's what we outsourced. So as you can see, the structure looked something like this. I showed you the detailed structure in one of my previous videos, but here you can see that it is the combination of the two. This is a simplified version of the team structure, where you have the owner, brand manager, supply manager, and they are working with the agencies or freelancers, right? Because the key here is that the agency or the freelancer is not communicating directly with you, wasting all of your mental capacity on all of these communications and clarifying details. They are communicating with your managers, right? So your graphic designer is talking to your brand manager. Your PPC agency is talking to your brand manager. So you can decrease the number of communication channels, right, for yourself. So ideally, you as the owner should be communicating only with your managers, with your brand manager, supply manager, accounting, and that's pretty much it, right? Because you need to structure this in a way where you have the time and capacity to do what matters, right? And that's usually not communicating with 5 or 10 different parties. To understand the difference between outsourcing and delegating is one thing. You also need to understand how to make the key decisions, when to start hiring, and what is the role to hire next. Make sure to check out this video where I explain the thought process in detail. Well, and that's pretty much it. See you next week.